There's 104 days of self-isolation. Outdoor school has come along to save us. We'll still social distance, but with entertainment, there's so much for us to do now. Like maybe doing critter catch with Fossil and Bumble, or cleaning up your messy room. Different experiments with Potato, or wilderness first aid with Trillium. Learning things with Root about animals, or measuring stuff with Marmot. Fascinating. Learning to plant with Lich, plant facts with Morning Glory, and obviously camp songs too.
This rocks!
As you can see, there's a whole lot of stuff to do. Outdoor school is so much fun.
Come on, Boulder!
So stick with us, cause the Creekside staff are gonna do it all. So stick with us, cause the Creekside staff are gonna do it all.
Head injuries include injury to your skull, to your scalp, and to your brain. These can be from a minor bump to a very serious brain traumatic injury. A closed head injury is when an object strikes you or you strike an object and it does not break the skull. An open head injury is when an object strikes you or you strike an object and it breaks open the skull. The skull can really damage the brain. The skull is designed to protect the brain. It is very hard and bony, so it really takes a high impact to break. The brain is soft and jelly-like, and it doesn't fill the entire skull. It floats in a nourishing liquid called the cerebrospinal fluid liquid, and that's supposed to act as a shock absorber to the brain, just like a car has shock absorbers. When you go down a bumpy road, it absorbs the shock, and so therefore the fluid is supposed to absorb some shock in the brain. This can be pretty protective, but if you have a high impact hit on the head, it does not work and the brain smashes against the skull and is bruised. The scalp is the skin covering your skull, and that can be injured also by a cut or a wound. A concussion is very common. You've all heard of concussions, especially with football players or soccer players. And that's when your brain is shaken or jarred and a person stops functioning, your brain stops functioning normally. And you must remember that the brain is the master control of everything in your body and in your mind. It controls all your movements, it controls everything, and including thoughts and ideas. So a brain injury is really, really serious, can be serious. So a concussion, if a person it's pretty mild usually, and the person is usually conscious. A person can be dazed or confused or a little bit off of balance and have a headache. The first 24 hours after a concussion is really important because a person should not be taking any pain medication because it might cover up additional signs that the concussion is worse than first thought. So the first 24 hours, a person should be monitored after a concussion. A contusion is a brain bruise. Bruising of the brain, it's when the blood vessels in the brain break and there's blood outside of the blood vessels. And we all have bruises on our arm and our leg, and we put ice on it, but we can't put ice on our brain. So a contusion can be very, very serious. If a person is having difficulty coordinating the movements, having difficulty understanding what is being said to him or her, having difficulty speaking, and or there's clear or bloody fluid coming out of the nose or the ears, these are signs that you need to call 911, get immediate medical attention. It can be very serious. Along with that, there can be pressure built up from the trauma in the brain. And if you get pressure high enough, it can damage the brain permanently, and it needs to be taken care of right away. So any of these signs for a contusion, which can go along with a concussion also. You can get bruising as well as a concussion, the jarring and shaking of the brain. Really important. So, a skull injury is when the skull, this big, hard, thick, bony bone, gets broken. and that takes a high impact, and that can be very serious because it usually affects the brain if the skull is broken. Then there can be scalp wounds, which are outside of the skull. This is all your scalp, the whole skin covering your scalp, and it can be cut or a wound. The most common reasons for head injuries are falls, that's the most common. And next there are physical assaults, when somebody hits you with an object or with their fist, gunshot wounds, traffic accidents, and any sports related or exercise related head injuries. First aid for head injuries. They can range in the severity from mild, needing no treatment, to severe. If you think that there's been a severe head injury, you always call 911. You don't mess around with the brain, as it is the master controller. And if there's been a bad traffic accident and you come upon it and you think there's a severe head injury, you always call 911. Do not move the person unless absolutely necessary, because along with a head injury, sometimes there is neck injury, and the brain and the neck and the spinal cord and everything is connected. So you don't want to have the person twist it. You can tell them not to twist it, and never move them unless it's critically for their safety. And if you do, keep the head and the neck in the same line. Do not remove a helmet if there's a head injury. Never remove a helmet. If there's bleeding, you can take gauze or a clean cloth and put pressure on the bleeding until it stops. If there's a wound, do not touch it, and you can wrap a clean cloth around it very, very loosely and gently. If a person is vomiting and they're sitting up, help them to lean forward a little bit so they won't choke. If they're lying down and vomiting, you need to move them a little bit to their side, keeping the neck and the head in the same line so that they won't choke on their vomit. If a person is unconscious and breathing, just keep the person there and call 911. Of course, if they're unconscious and not breathing, you have to start CPR immediately. Prevention for head injuries are: wear a seatbelt in all vehicles, wear a helmet when biking, skiing, skateboarding, or motorcycle. Really important. And also use safety precautions. If you go back to contact sports and you've had a concussion or something, they usually do a helmet or some safety precautions so you won't get hurt again. This is all for part 4, and this is Trillium. This is all for part 4, and this is Trillium signing out. Have a good day.
Close your eyes, you're at Creekside by the fire. Now I hear outdoor school, so cool. I'm super glad you made it here to learn about science and nature and make a few friends out here. When you're on field study, getting good and muddy, Eldon pelts and in your beads, Jericho. If you don't think outdoor school's going to be so cool, I'm here to tell you outdoor school's going to change you. Just show up, just come out, make your student leaders proud. Grab your boots, grab your coats, fill your water up, go before you go. Aren't you the kids who want to learn all about Fun Guy? Though it took some time to arrive here, you'll find the roots are real, Fun Guy. It's so cool already, seen some clones, it's scary, it's hardly school at all, Jericho. If you don't think outdoor school's going to be so cool, I'm here to tell you outdoor school's going to change you. Just show up, just come out, make your student leaders proud. Grab your boots, grab your coat, fill your water up and let's